The smell of bacon grease and shame hung thick in the back kitchen of the Dusty Rose Saloon, where Zelda Norton spent her days scrubbing pots until her knuckles bled and her back screamed for mercy. It was May of 1878, and Scottsbluff, Nebraska had grown from a pioneer stopover into a proper town with 2 saloons, a general store, and enough cattlemen passing through to keep the whiskey flowing and the card tables busy. Zelda kept her eyes down when she carried plates through the main room, her brown hair pulled back so tight it gave her headaches, her face turned away from the laughter and the light. She had learned long ago that invisibility was safer than hope. The other girls who worked the saloon floor wore rouge and ribbons, their dresses cut low enough to make the cowboys spend an extra $1 on rot-gut whiskey. They were the pretty ones, the ones men wrote bad poetry about after too many drinks. Zelda had tried once, when she first arrived in Scottsbluff 3 years ago, desperate and alone after her parents died of fever on the trail west. The saloon owner, a thick-necked man named Parsons, had looked her up and down with eyes like a butcher appraising tough meat. "Kitchen," he'd said, jerking his thumb toward the back. "You ain't got the face for the floor." Those words had burrowed under her skin like a splinter, festering. She told herself it didn't matter, that honest work was honest work, that she should be grateful to have a roof over her head and 3 meals a day. But late at night, in the cramped room she shared with 2 other kitchen girls, she pressed her fingers against the scar that ran from her left eyebrow to her cheekbone, the parting gift from a wagon accident when she was 12, and wondered if anyone would ever look at her with anything but pity or indifference. The morning everything changed started like any other. Zelda hauled water from the pump behind the building, her arms aching from yesterday's work. The sun was barely up, painting the Nebraska sky in shades of pink and gold that seemed too beautiful for a world that could be so cruel. She was bent over the wash basin, attacking a particularly stubborn pot when she heard the commotion from the main room. Sweet mercy, who is that? One of the saloon girls, Kitty, breathed out like a prayer. Zelda dried her hands and crept to the doorway, staying in the shadows as she always did. A man stood at the bar, and even from behind she could tell he was different from the usual dusty cowboys who stumbled in looking for comfort at the bottom of a bottle. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar. When he turned to survey the room, she saw a face that looked carved from sun-weathered stone, all sharp angles and quiet strength. But it was his eyes that caught her, pale blue like a winter sky, full of intelligence and something else she couldn't quite name. "Whiskey," he said, his voice low and steady. "And information if you're selling." Parsons himself had come out to greet him, which meant this stranger had money. "What kind of information you looking for, friend?" "Name's Barrett Lawrence. I'm tracking a man goes by Dutch Hendricks. Word is he came through here about a week back." Zelda's hands tightened on the doorframe. She knew that name. Dutch Hendricks had been in the saloon 10 days ago, drunk and mean, boasting about a bank job in Cheyenne. He'd thrown a plate at her when she brought his food too slow for his liking, and when she ducked, he'd laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. "Can't say I recall the name," Parsons lied smoothly. "He never gave up information about customers, said it was bad for business." Barrett Lawrence took a slow sip of his whiskey, his eyes moving around the room with the careful attention of a man used to danger. His gaze swept past the doorway where Zelda stood, then snapped back, locking onto her with an intensity that made her breath catch. She stepped back into the kitchen, her heart hammering. No one looked at her like that. No one looked at her at all. "Miss." His voice came from closer than she expected. She spun around to find him standing in the kitchen doorway, filling it with his presence. "Sorry to startle you." I'm wondering if maybe you might have seen the man I'm looking for." Up close, she could see the dust of hard travel on his clothes, the way his gun belt sat easy on his hips like it belonged there. A deputy star was pinned to his vest, slightly tarnished but real. "I don't know nothing," she said automatically, the words she'd learned to say to stay out of trouble. "You sure about that?" "He's dangerous, miss. Killed a bank clerk in Cheyenne, an old man who was just trying to do his job. Left a widow and 4 children behind." Zelda's stomach turned. She thought of her own parents, how quickly life could be stolen away. "He went north," she heard herself say. "Toward the Platte River. Said something about having friends in Fort Laramie." Barrett Lawrence's eyes stayed on her face, not sliding away to find someone prettier to talk to, not flickering with disgust at her scar. He really looked at her like she was a person worth seeing. "Thank you, miss. That's helpful." He paused, still watching her. "What's your name?" "Zelda." "Zelda Norton. Miss Norton." He touched the brim of his hat. "I'm obliged for your help." He should have left then. The information was given, his business done, but he didn't move and neither did she. "That scar," he said finally, and her hand flew up to her face automatically, shame burning hot in her chest. "Wagon accident," she nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in her throat. "My brother has one similar from when we were kids. Spooked horse dragged him through a barbed fence." Barrett's voice was matter of fact, not pitying. "Makes him look distinguished, my sister-in-law says. Like he's got stories to tell." No one had ever said anything kind about her scar. Most people pretended not to see it, their eyes skittering away. Some stared like she was a curiosity at a traveling show. "I should get back to work," she managed, "of course." But he still didn't move. "Miss Norton, this might be forward of me, but when I get back from Fort Laramie, would you allow me to call on you?" The words didn't make sense at first. Call on her. Like she was one of the pretty girls, like she was worth courting. "Why?" The question came out sharper than she intended, defensive. Barrett Lawrence looked genuinely puzzled. "Because I'd like to know you better." "Because I've been riding alone for 3 weeks and the first person to show me kindness in any town was you. Because—" He trailed off, then said simply, "Because I'd like to." "You don't have to be cruel," Zelda said, her voice small. "I know what I look like." "What do you look like?" The question startled her. Not pretty, not worth looking at twice. Something shifted in Barrett's expression, a flash of what might have been anger, though not at her. "Then every man who's told you that is a fool and a liar." He said it with such conviction that she almost believed him. "Miss Norton, I can't stop looking at you. From the moment I saw you in that doorway, I haven't been able to think about much else." "Stop." The word came out as barely more than a whisper. "Please stop." "Stop what?" "Telling the truth." He took a step closer and she could smell leather and sage and something clean, like rain. "I'll go track down Dutch Hendricks. It's my job and that old bank clerk deserves justice. But I'm coming back and I'm going to ask you again if I can call on you. You can say no. That's your right. But don't say no because you think you're not worth looking at. Because that's the biggest lie I've heard in a long time." Then he was gone, his boots loud on the saloon floor, and Zelda was left standing in the kitchen with her hands pressed to her burning cheeks, her heart doing strange gymnastics in her chest. What did he want? Parsons appeared in the doorway, his face suspicious. "Just asking about Dutch Hendricks. You didn't tell him nothing, did you?" Zelda met his eyes steadily. "I told him I didn't know nothing." The lie came easily. Dutch Hendricks had killed an old man, left children without a father. Whatever loyalty Parsons thought he owed to his customers didn't extend to covering for murderers. Not in Zelda's book. The next week crawled by like molasses in January. Zelda scrubbed pots and hauled water and tried not to think about pale blue eyes and words that sounded too good to be true. Barrett Lawrence was probably already gone. headed to wherever lawmen went when they finished their business. The things he'd said were just politeness, the kind of empty courtesy men sometimes showed when they wanted information. But late at night, she let herself remember the way he'd looked at her. Really looked, not glancing away in discomfort or pity, like she was something worth seeing. "You've been mooning around like a lovesick calf," said Marjorie, one of the other kitchen girls, as they peeled potatoes together. "What's gotten into you?" "Nothing." But Zelda couldn't stop the small smile that tugged at her lips. "It's that deputy, isn't it? The handsome one who was asking questions." Marjorie laughed, not unkindly. "Don't get your hopes up, honey. Men like that don't come back for girls like us." The words stung because they echoed Zelda's own thoughts. She was a kitchen girl with a scarred face and rough hands. Barrett Lawrence was a lawman, educated and well-spoken, the kind of man who could have his pick of women. Why would he choose her? 13 days after he left, Zelda was bringing wood in from the back when she heard a familiar voice at the bar. Her heart lurched so hard she nearly dropped her armload of kindling, whiskey, and whatever's hot from the kitchen. She peered through the doorway. Barrett Lawrence sat at the bar, dusty and tired-looking but whole. Safe. She hadn't realized how worried she'd been until relief flooded through her. "Did you find him?" Parsons asked. "That man you were tracking. Fort Laramie Marshal has him locked up. He'll hang for what he did." Barrett's voice was grim but satisfied. "Justice doesn't bring that bank clerk back, but at least his family knows the man who killed him won't hurt anyone else." Zelda quickly ladled stew into a bowl and cut thick slices of bread, her hands trembling slightly. She should have one of the other girls take it out. That would be the safe thing, the sensible thing. Instead, she carried it through the doorway herself. Barrett's face lit up when he saw her, a genuine smile that transformed his serious features into something warm and open. "Miss Norton, I was hoping you'd be here." "Where else would I be?" She set the bowl in front of him, hyper-aware of how close her hand came to his on the bar. "I work here. I know. But I worried maybe you'd think I was just talking to hear myself speak, that you wouldn't believe I'd come back." "I didn't believe it," she admitted. "People say a lot of things they don't mean." "I mean what I say." He said it quietly, holding her gaze. "Always have. It's gotten me in trouble more than once, but I don't know how to be any other way." Parsons was watching them with narrowed eyes, and Zelda knew she'd already lingered too long. "I should get back to work." "What time do you finish?" "Sundown, mostly. Sometimes later if there's a crowd." "Could I walk you home after?" The question hung in the air between them. Zelda was acutely aware of Kitty and the other saloon girls watching from across the room, of Parsons's frown, of her own racing pulse. "I room upstairs," she said. "It's not much of a walk." "Then could I sit with you somewhere? Talk for a bit?" Barrett's voice was patient but determined. "Please, Miss Norton. I've ridden hard for 13 days, and the thought of seeing you again is what kept me in the saddle when I wanted to stop." "Why?" The word burst out of her, too loud in the relative quiet of the saloon. "Why me?" "There are prettier girls right here, girls who know how to talk to men, girls who don't spend their days elbow-deep in dishwater." Barrett set down his spoon carefully. "Can I tell you what I see when I look at you?" She wanted to say no, wanted to flee back to the kitchen where it was safe and she knew her place. But she nodded. "I see someone who works hard without complaint. Someone who was kind enough to help a stranger get justice for a murdered man, even though it gained her nothing. Someone with eyes the color of honey in sunlight and a smile that makes me want to earn another one." His voice dropped lower. "Someone brave enough to say what she thinks, even when it scares her. That's what I see, Miss Norton, and I can't stop looking." The saloon had gone quiet. Everyone was listening now, and Zelda felt heat creeping up her neck, but Barrett didn't seem to care who heard him. "Sundown," she whispered. "There's a bench out back by the well." His smile could have lit the whole room. "I'll be there." Zelda fled to the kitchen, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. Behind her, she heard Kitty's voice pitched to Carrie. "Well, I'll be damned." The afternoon stretched out endlessly. Zelda burned her hand on a pot, spilled flour across the floor, and dropped a plate that shattered into a dozen pieces. Marjorie laughed at her. "You've got it bad, girl. Haven't seen anyone this distracted since that cattle buyer sweet-talked Kitty last summer." "It's not like that. He's just being friendly." "Honey, men don't look at friends the way that Deputy looks at you, like you're water and he's been crossing the desert for a month." Marjorie's weathered face softened. "Don't talk yourself out of something good just because you're scared. Lord knows there's little enough good in this world." When the sun finally began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Zelda untied her apron with shaking hands. She'd managed to sneak upstairs earlier to wash her face and change into her better dress, a simple blue cotton that was still patched and worn but at least clean. Her hair refused to cooperate, brown strands escaping the bun she'd tried to pin in place. She looked at herself in the small, cracked mirror that hung on the wall. The scar stood out pale against her skin, a permanent reminder of the day the wagon wheel had shattered and sent her flying into a jagged rock. Her face was too thin, her features too plain, her hands too rough. "You're being a fool," she told her reflection. "He's going to realize his mistake and disappear, and you're going to be left feeling worse than before." But she went downstairs anyway. Barrett was already waiting by the well, standing when he saw her approach. He'd washed up too, she noticed. His dark hair was still damp and he'd changed into a clean shirt. "You came," he said, like he'd been worried she wouldn't. "I said I would." "I know, but I worried you'd change your mind, decide I wasn't worth your time." The idea was so absurd that Zelda laughed, a genuine sound that surprised them both. "You're worried about being worth my time. I'm a kitchen girl in a saloon. You're a deputy marshal." "I'm a man who's tired of sleeping on the ground and eating hardtack," Barrett said. "Who spends his days tracking down the worst humanity has to offer. Who goes weeks sometimes without a real conversation." He gestured to the bench. "May I?" They sat, not quite touching but close enough that Zelda was intensely aware of his presence. The evening air was cooling, carrying the smell of dust and sagebrush. From inside the saloon came the sound of a badly tuned piano and men's laughter. "Tell me about yourself," Barrett said. "Where are you from? How did you end up in Scottsbluff?" So she told him, haltingly at first, then with increasing ease. About her parents, farmers who decided to try their luck in Oregon. About the fever that had swept their wagon train, killing 12 people including her mother and father. About being 18 years old and utterly alone, left in Scottsbluff because she'd been too sick herself to continue the journey. "Parsons gave me work when no one else would," she said. "I know he's not a good man, not really, but he gave me a chance to survive when I had nothing." "That's why you protect his customers," Barrett said. "It wasn't a question, not the murderers. I'm glad you caught Dutch Hendricks." Zelda picked at a thread on her dress. "But yeah, I guess I feel like I owe Parsons something." "You don't owe anyone the right to make you feel less than you are. He gave me work when I needed it. That counts for something." Barrett was quiet for a moment. "My parents have a ranch about 60 miles south of here. Cattle, some horses. It's good land and they're getting older, need help running it. My brother Jake has a place nearby with his wife and their 3 kids. My sister married a banker in Denver." He paused. "I always thought I'd settle down eventually, find a woman who could put up with me, raise a family. But being a lawman doesn't leave much room for that kind of life." "Why do you do it then?" "Because someone has to. Because there are widows who deserve to know their husband's killer faced justice. Because there are people traveling west who need someone watching out for them. He turned to look at her directly. But lately I've been thinking maybe it's time for a change. Maybe it's time to go home, help my parents with the ranch, build something instead of just chasing down what's broken. That sounds nice, Zelda said softly. It does, doesn't it? Barrett's hand moved on the bench, his fingers stopping just short of touching hers. Miss Norton, I know this is fast. I know I've only met you twice, but I've learned in this job that life is short and uncertain, and when something feels right, you don't let it slip away. Her breath caught. What are you saying? I'm saying I'd like to get to know you better. Court you proper if you'll let me. I have to head back to Cheyenne for the trial, give testimony about capturing Hendricks. But I could come back after, visit regular, see where this goes. You can't be serious. But even as she said it, Zelda desperately wanted him to be. I am. I can't stop looking at you. I can't stop thinking about you. From the moment you told me where to find a killer, putting yourself at risk to help a stranger, I haven't been able to get you out of my head. His voice was low, intense. Tell me I'm not alone in this. Tell me you feel something too. Zelda's throat was tight with emotion she couldn't name. I feel like I'm dreaming, like I'm going to wake up and you'll be gone and I'll still be the girl no one looks at twice. Look at me. Barrett waited until she met his eyes. I'm real. This is real. And you are beautiful, Zelda Norton. Your scar doesn't make you less. If anything, it makes you more, because it means you survived something that could have killed you. You're strong and kind and brave, and any man who can't see that is a blind fool. A tear escaped down her cheek before she could stop it. Barrett reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and wiped it gently with his thumb. Let me court you, he said. Let me show you how special you are. If you decide I'm not worth your time, I'll accept that. But give us a chance. Zelda thought about Marjorie's words. Don't talk yourself out of something good just because you're scared. She thought about her parents, who'd taken a chance on a new life out west, even though it was dangerous and uncertain. She thought about living the rest of her life in the kitchen of the Dusty Rose Saloon, invisible and alone. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Barrett's smile was brilliant, transforming his whole face. Yeah. And then, because fear and hope were tangled up inside her like messy yarn, she added, but if you change your mind, if you realize you made a mistake, please just tell me. Don't let me keep hoping when there's nothing to hope for. I won't change my mind. He said it with absolute certainty, but I'll prove it to you. However long it takes, I'll prove it. They sat together on that bench until full dark, talking about everything and nothing. Barrett told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to track and shoot from his father, about the day he'd pinned on a deputy's star for the first time. Zelda told him about the books she'd loved as a child, the few precious volumes her mother had carried west. About her dream of maybe, someday, having a little house with a garden where she could grow vegetables and flowers. My mother's got a garden that's her pride and joy, Barrett said. She could teach you anything you wanted to know. She'd like you. The casual certainty in his voice, the implication that Zelda might meet his mother, might become part of his life, made her dizzy with possibility. When they finally parted, Barrett took her hand gently in his. His palms were calloused from riding and roping, his grip warm and strong. I'll be back in 3 weeks, maybe 4, he said. Will you wait for me? I'll be here. She managed a smile. I'm not going anywhere. Good. He lifted her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so courtly and unexpected that Zelda's breath stuttered. Good night, Zelda Norton. Dream of me. She did dream of him that night and many nights after, but the days were long and doubt crept in during the quiet hours. Had she imagined the intensity in his eyes? Had she misunderstood his intentions? 3 weeks stretched ahead like an eternity. Kitty cornered her the next morning. That deputy is really sweet on you, isn't he? I think so. Maybe. Zelda concentrated on scrubbing an already clean pot. Don't sound so scared. He seemed like a decent sort. Kitty's expression was unusually kind. Better than most who come through here. You deserve someone who looks at you like you hung the moon. He'll probably forget about me once he gets to Cheyenne. There'll be prettier girls there. Lord, you're stubborn about this. Kitty shook her head. That man didn't see anyone else in the whole saloon. Trust me. I know when a man's interested, and Barrett Lawrence couldn't take his eyes off you. Zelda wanted to believe it. Wanted it so badly it scared her. The weeks crawled past. Zelda worked and waited, her heart jumping every time the saloon door opened. She started saving her small wages, tucking coins into a tin under her bed. For what? She wasn't sure. Maybe nothing. Maybe a future that would never come. Then, 22 days after he'd left, Barrett walked through the door of the Dusty Rose Saloon carrying a package wrapped in brown paper. Zelda saw him from the kitchen doorway and froze, her heart hammering. He looked tired, dust covered from travel, but his face broke into that brilliant smile when he spotted her. Miss Norton. He crossed the room in long strides, ignoring Parsons's greeting. I hope I'm not too late. Too late for what? To prove I came back, that I meant what I said. He held out the package. I brought you something. Her hands trembled as she took it. You didn't have to do that. Open it. Inside the paper were 3 books, their covers worn but intact. She read the titles with growing wonder. Pride and Prejudice, A Tale of Two Cities and a collection of Walt Whitman's poetry. You said you liked to read, Barrett said softly. The shopkeeper in Cheyenne said these were good. I hope you don't already have them. Zelda couldn't speak past the lump in her throat. Books were expensive, precious. No one had ever given her a gift like this. Thank you, she managed finally. This is too much. It's not nearly enough. Barrett glanced around the saloon at Parsons watching them with calculating eyes, at the curious stares of the other patrons. Can you take a break? Walk with me? She should say no. There were dishes to wash, floors to sweep. But she found herself nodding, setting the books carefully aside and untying her apron. They walked through Scottsbluff's dusty streets, past the general store and the church and the houses where respectable families lived. People stared, and Zelda tried not to notice, tried not to hear the whispers. That's the kitchen girl from the saloon. What's she doing with that marshal? Didn't think she was the type to catch a man's eye. Barrett must have heard them too because his jaw tightened. But he didn't say anything, just kept walking until they reached the edge of town where the prairie opened up in endless golden grassland. The trial went well, he said finally. Dutch Hendricks will hang next month. The bank clerk's widow thanked me for catching him. She's pregnant with their 5th child. His voice was rough. At least she got to say goodbye to her husband. At least she knows justice was done. You did a good thing. I was just doing my job. Barrett stopped walking and turned to face her. Zelda, I've been thinking about what I want, about where my life is headed. And I keep coming back to this. I don't want to be a lawman anymore. She stared at him. But you're so good at it. You brought justice for that widow. And it took me away from you for 3 weeks. If I keep this job, it'll keep taking me away. Weeks, months at a time, chasing outlaws across the territories, never knowing if I'll come back in one piece. He stepped closer. My parents need help on the ranch. It's honest work, good work, building something instead of tearing things down. I could have a home, a life, a future. That sounds wonderful. Zelda tried to keep the wistfulness from her voice. I'm happy for you. Come with me. The words hung in the air between them, impossible and terrifying and wonderful. What? Come with me to my parents' ranch. Not right away, he added quickly. I know that wouldn't be proper, but let me court you for real. Let me show you what life could be like. And if you decide you want it, if you decide you want me, then we can get married and you'll never have to scrub another pot in that saloon." Zelda's head was spinning. "You can't be serious." "You barely know me." "I know enough. I know you're kind and strong and brave. I know when I look at you I see my future. I know I can't stop thinking about you." Barrett took her hands in his grip warm and steady. "I know this is fast. I know I'm asking you to take a huge chance on a man you've only talked to a few times. But Zelda, life is short. I've seen too much death to waste time on uncertainty when something feels this right. I'm not pretty." It came out as barely more than a whisper. "People stare at my scar. I don't know anything about ranching or being a wife. I can barely manage being a kitchen girl." "Stop." Barrett's voice was fierce. "Stop saying you're not pretty. Every time you say that, you're letting other people's blindness define you. I look at you and I see beauty. Not despite your scar, but including it because it's part of who you are, part of what you survived." Tears were streaming down her face now. "I'm scared. I know I'm scared too." His thumbs traced gentle circles on the backs of her hands. "But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. Say you'll give this a chance. Give us a chance." Zelda thought about the kitchen of the Dusty Rose Saloon, about spending the rest of her life invisible and alone. She thought about Barrett's eyes, the way he really saw her. She thought about her parents, who'd been brave enough to chase a dream even though it killed them. "Okay," she said. "Okay, yes." Barrett let out a breath like he'd been holding it for 3 weeks. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Zelda felt something tight and scared inside her chest finally start to loosen. "Thank you," he murmured into her hair. "Thank you." They stood there for a long time, wrapped in each other, while the Nebraska wind whispered through the grass around them. The courtship that followed was like nothing Zelda had experienced before. Barrett stayed in Scottsbluff for 2 weeks, taking a room at the boarding house and spending every free moment with her. He walked her to the general store and insisted on buying her fabric for a new dress. He sat with her in the evenings, reading aloud from the books he'd given her while she mended her clothes. He talked to her like her opinions mattered, asking what she thought about everything from politics to poetry. "You're so smart," he said one evening, wonder in his voice. "Has anyone ever told you that?" "No." Zelda set down her sewing. "Most people don't think I'm anything at all." "Then most people are fools." He met her after her shifts ended and walked her the few steps to her room, even though it was barely a walk at all. He never tried to push for more than she was ready to give, never suggested anything improper. He courted her with a respect that made her feel precious. Parsons watched all this with increasing displeasure. "That deputy's been here too long," he said one morning. "He planning to set up residence." "He's leaving soon," Zelda said quietly. "Going back to his parents' ranch." "Good. I need you focused on work, not mooning over some cowboy with pretty words." But she was already gone, at least in spirit. Every conversation with Barrett revealed more about the life he was offering. His parents sounded kind, his brother's family welcoming. The ranch was 3,000 acres of good grazing land, with a house that Barrett's grandfather had built and a creek that ran year-round. "There's a room that was my grandmother's sewing room," Barrett told her. "Windows facing east to catch the morning light. My mother keeps saying someone should use it, make it into something special. I thought maybe you'd want it for your books, for reading, a room of her own. Windows with morning light. Books and peace and safety. It sounded like heaven." On Barrett's last night in Scottsbluff, before he had to return to Cheyenne to formally resign his position, they sat on their bench by the well under a sky full of stars. "I'll be gone 3 weeks, maybe a month," he said. "Got to wrap up my cases, collect my back pay, make sure they find someone to replace me. Then I'll come back for you if you'll still have me." I'll still have you." The words came out more confidently than she felt. "When I come back, I want to do this proper." Barrett shifted on the bench, turning to face her fully. "Zelda Norton, I know we haven't known each other long. I know this is fast and you have every right to want more time. But I need you to know my intentions are serious. When I come back, I'm going to ask you to marry me. I'm going to ask you to come home with me, be my wife, build a life together." He paused. "I wanted to tell you now so you have time to think about it, so you can decide if that's what you want. I won't pressure you, won't push, but I wanted you to know where I stand." Zelda's heart was racing. "You want to marry me, more than I've ever wanted anything." His voice was low and intense. "I want to wake up next to you every morning. I want to build you that room full of books and morning light. I want to introduce you to my family and watch you charm them the way you've charmed me. I want to spend the rest of my life proving to you that you're beautiful and worthy and loved. I don't know how to be a ranch wife. You'll learn. My mother will teach you, and so will Jake's wife, Emily. But Zelda, that's not what matters. What matters is whether you want this. Whether you want me." Did she want this? The question seemed absurd. Of course she wanted it. She wanted Barrett with an intensity that terrified her. She wanted the life he was describing, the future full of possibility. She wanted to be seen and valued and loved. "I want it," she whispered. "I want you." Barrett's exhale was shaky with relief. He cupped her face gently in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "Can I kiss you?" She nodded, and he leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. Then his lips met hers, soft and warm and sweet, and Zelda felt like she was falling and flying at the same time. The kiss was gentle, reverent, full of promise. When they pulled apart, Barrett rested his forehead against hers. "I'll come back for you," he said. "I swear it, I believe you." And she did. For the first time in her life, Zelda Norton believed that good things could happen to her too. The month Barrett was gone was the longest of Zelda's life. She worked through her shifts in a daze, her mind constantly wandering to a future that seemed too wonderful to be real. She reread the books he'd given her, running her fingers over the inscriptions he'd written on the inside covers, in Pride and Prejudice. For Zelda, who deserves her own happy ending. Barrett, in the Whitman collection. These poems made me think of you, of beauty and strength and possibility. Yours, Barrett. She traced the words until she had them memorized, proof that this was real, that someone valued her enough to write such things. Kitty helped her sew 2 new dresses from the fabric Barrett had bought. "You're really leaving," she said, not quite a question. "If he comes back." "He'll come back. That man's in love with you, even if he hasn't said it yet." Kitty bit off a thread. "I'm happy for you, Zelda. You deserve something good. So do you. Maybe. But my something good probably doesn't look like a ranch and a handsome deputy." Kitty smiled, a little sad. "Some of us are saloon girls to our bones, but you never were. You were always meant for something more." Marjorie gave her a small bag of coins. "For the journey," she said gruffly. "Don't argue, just take it. And when you're settled on that ranch with your handsome cowboy, remember us kitchen girls once in a while. I could never forget you. You've been kinder to me than family." Even Parsons, surprisingly, seemed resigned rather than angry. "You're really set on this." "I am." He studied her for a long moment. "You've been good work, Norton. Reliable. I'll miss having you in the kitchen." It was the closest thing to a compliment he'd ever given her. 33 days after Barrett left, Zelda was washing dishes when she heard the commotion from the main room. Her heart knew before her mind did, and she dropped the plate she was holding, not caring when it shattered. Barrett stood in the doorway, and his face when he saw her made everything worth it. All the waiting, all the doubt, all the fear. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms right there in front of everyone. "I came back," he said unnecessarily. "You came back." She was crying and laughing at the same time. He pulled back just enough to look down at her, his eyes intense. "Zelda Norton, I love you. I should have said it before, but I was trying to be proper, trying not to rush you. But I can't wait anymore. I love you and I want to marry you and I want to take you home." The saloon had gone completely silent. Every eye was on them. "I love you too," Zelda said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "And yes, 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 I'll marry you." Barrett's answering smile could have lit up the whole territory. He kissed her right there in the Dusty Rose Saloon, a kiss full of joy and promise, and Zelda heard Kitty's whoop of excitement mixed with applause from the patrons. When they finally broke apart, Barrett kept her close. "The preacher's expecting us at the church in an hour, if that's okay with you. I got a license in Cheyenne. My brother Jake and his wife rode in with me to stand witness. We can get married today, right now, and start heading to the ranch tomorrow." "Today?" Zelda's head was spinning. "Unless you want to wait. We can wait if you need more time." "I just thought, why wait when we both know what we want?" He looked suddenly uncertain. "Is it too fast?" Zelda thought about the life she was leaving behind, the kitchen and the pots and the invisibility. Then she thought about the life ahead. A home, a family, a man who looked at her like she was precious. "It's not too fast, but I need to change and I should say goodbye." An hour later, Zelda stood in the small wooden church wearing her best dress, her hair pulled back with a ribbon Kitty had given her. Barrett stood across from her in a clean shirt and vest, his brother Jake and sister-in-law Emily flanking them. The preacher was an older man with kind eyes who smiled at them throughout the short ceremony. "Do you, Barrett Lawrence, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." Barrett's voice was steady and sure. "And do you, Zelda Norton, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Zelda looked at Barrett, at the love and certainty in his eyes. "I do." "Then, by the power vested in me by the territory of Nebraska, I pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss your bride." Barrett gathered her in his arms and kissed her sweetly, tenderly, like she was something infinitely precious. When they broke apart, Emily was crying happy tears and Jake was grinning. "Welcome to the family, Zelda," Jake said, pulling her into a hug. "I hope you know what you're getting into with this one." "Hey," Barrett protested, but he was smiling. Emily hugged her next. "I'm so glad Barrett found you. We're going to be great friends, I can tell." They had dinner at the boarding house restaurant, a celebration that felt surreal to Zelda. She was married. She was Zelda Lawrence now, wife to Barrett Lawrence, part of a family. It didn't seem possible. That night in the room Barrett had rented, he was gentle and patient with her inexperience. "We can wait," he said. "There's no rush." But Zelda didn't want to wait. She wanted all of it, the full promise of their future starting now. Barrett made love to her with tenderness and care, murmuring against her skin how beautiful she was, how much he loved her, how lucky he was. Afterward, lying wrapped in his arms, Zelda felt peace settle over her like a blanket. "I can't believe this is real. It's real." Barrett kissed the top of her head. "You're my wife, I'm your husband. This is our life now. Say it again." "Which part?" "The part about me being beautiful." Barrett propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her seriously. "You're beautiful, Zelda Lawrence. Your eyes, your smile, your heart, the curve of your cheek and the strength in your hands, your scar that shows you're a survivor. Everything about you is beautiful to me. I spent so long thinking no one would ever look at me twice. Well, I can't stop looking at you. Haven't been able to since the first moment I saw you." He traced her scar gently with one finger. "And I never will." They left Scottsbluff the next morning, riding south toward the ranch with Jake and Emily. The journey took 2 days, and Zelda spent them alternating between excitement and terror. What if Barrett's parents didn't like her? What if she couldn't learn to be a rancher's wife? What if she failed at this new life? But Barrett seemed to sense her fears. He rode close beside her, pointing out landmarks and telling stories about growing up in this country. Jake and Emily included her in their conversations, making her feel welcome. By the time they crested the final hill, and she saw the ranch spread out below, some of her anxiety had eased. The house was larger than she'd expected, a sturdy structure of wood and stone with a wide porch and windows that gleamed in the afternoon sun. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, and she could see horses in a corral near the barn. "Home," Barrett said softly. "Our home." His parents came out to meet them, and Zelda's nervousness spiked again. But Margaret Lawrence took one look at her and pulled her into a warm hug. "Welcome, dear. Barrett's told us so much about you in his letters. We're so happy to have you here." Thomas Lawrence was a tall, weathered man who looked like an older version of his sons. "Welcome to the family, Zelda. Any woman brave enough to marry this troublemaker is all right in my book." "Pa," Barrett protested, but he was grinning. The house was warm and welcoming, full of comfortable furniture and the smell of fresh bread. Margaret showed Zelda to the room that would be theirs, a large space with windows facing the east, just as Barrett had described. "Your grandmother's sewing room," Zelda said, remembering. "We converted it to a bedroom for Barrett when he got older," Margaret explained. "But there's still that smaller room downstairs if you want it for something special. Barrett mentioned you like to read." "I do, but you don't have to give me a whole room." "Nonsense. This is your home now. You should have a space that's yours." Margaret's smile was kind. "I'm so glad Barrett found you, dear. He's been writing about you for weeks, and I can see why. You're lovely." Zelda touched her scar self-consciously, and Margaret caught the gesture. "My sister had a scar like that," she said matter-of-factly. "From a fire when she was young. Never stopped her from living her life, finding love, raising a family. It's just part of your story, dear. Nothing to hide." Over dinner that night, surrounded by Barrett's family, Zelda felt something she hadn't experienced in years: belonging. They talked and laughed, sharing stories and making plans. Emily described the small ranch she and Jake were building nearby. Margaret talked about the garden and how she'd love help with the preserving this fall. Thomas discussed the cattle business and asked Zelda questions about her life, treating her opinions as valuable. And Barrett sat beside her, his hand finding hers under the table, his love evident in every glance. That night in their room, Barrett held her close. "What do you think? Can you be happy here?" "I think I already am." Zelda snuggled against his chest. "Your family is wonderful. Your mother is so kind. She likes you. I knew she would." He kissed her forehead. "This is just the beginning, Zelda. Our whole lives are ahead of us." The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Margaret taught Zelda about running a ranch household, from cooking for a crew of ranch hands to preserving vegetables for winter. Emily became a close friend, riding over several times a week to visit. Zelda learned to milk cows, gather eggs, manage the enormous garden Margaret had been tending for decades. She also learned to ride properly, with Barrett as her patient teacher. He took her out across the ranch, showing her the boundaries of the property, the best spots for watching sunsets, the creek where he'd learned to fish as a boy. "I thought I knew what I wanted from life," he told her one evening as they sat by the creek, watching the water flow past. "Thought being a lawman, bringing justice, that was my purpose. But this, being here with you, building something instead of chasing shadows, this is what I was meant for. No regrets about giving it up, not a single one." He pulled her close. "You're my purpose now, Zelda. You and whatever life we build together." 6 weeks after they arrived at the ranch, Zelda woke feeling queasy. At first she thought it was something she'd eaten, but when the nausea continued for days, Margaret took her aside. "Dear, When was your last monthly?" Zelda thought back, her eyes widening. "Before the wedding, I was so distracted I didn't even notice." Margaret's smile was knowing. "I think you might be with child." The realization was overwhelming. A baby. She and Barrett were going to have a baby. When she told him that evening, Barrett's face went through a journey of emotions, shock to joy to fierce protectiveness. "A baby? We're having a baby. Looks like it." He picked her up and spun her around, laughing. "A baby, Zelda, we're going to be parents." "Put me down before you make me sick on your boots," she said, but she was laughing too. The pregnancy was not easy. Zelda was sick for months, barely able to keep food down. Margaret and Emily took turns sitting with her, bringing her dry toast and ginger tea, distracting her with stories and gossip. Barrett hovered anxiously, trying to do everything for her until she finally snapped that she was pregnant, not an invalid. "I just want to help," he said, looking wounded. "I know, but you have to let me do things myself. I'm not made of glass." As her belly swelled, Zelda sometimes caught sight of herself in the mirror and marveled. This body, which she'd spent so long thinking was inadequate, was growing a new life. The scar on her face seemed less important now, just one small part of who she was. The baby came in early spring, after hours of hard labor that left Zelda exhausted and sweating. Margaret and Emily attended her while Barrett paced outside, refusing to go help Thomas with the cattle work. When the baby finally arrived, a lusty cry filling the room, Margaret announced, "It's a boy." They named him Thomas Barrett Lawrence, Tommy for short. He had Barrett's dark hair and Zelda's honey-colored eyes, and from the moment they placed him in her arms, Zelda knew a love fiercer than anything she'd imagined. Barrett cried when he held his son for the first time. "He's perfect. Zelda, he's absolutely perfect." "We made him," she said wonderingly. "You and me. Best thing I've ever done." Barrett looked up at her, his eyes shining. "You've given me everything, Zelda. A home, a purpose, a son. I don't have words for how much I love you." "Then show me," she said softly. "Every day for the rest of our lives. Show me." The years that followed were full of hard work and deep happiness. Tommy grew into a sturdy, curious toddler who followed Barrett everywhere, imitating his father's walk and speech. When he was 3, Zelda gave birth to twin girls, Clara and Rose, who had their father's blue eyes and their mother's stubborn streak. The ranch prospered under Thomas and Barrett's management. They expanded the herd, improved the bloodlines, built additional outbuildings. Zelda's garden became the envy of the county, her preserves winning prizes at the county fair. She and Emily became inseparable, their children growing up more like siblings than cousins. On their 5th anniversary, Barrett took Zelda back to the creek where they'd spent so many peaceful evenings. 5 years, he said. Sometimes it feels like a lifetime, sometimes like yesterday. Happy, she asked, though she knew the answer. Happier than I ever thought possible. He pulled her close. Remember when you told me you weren't pretty enough for a man to look at twice? Zelda made a face. Don't remind me, I was being foolish. You were being hurt. There's a difference. Barrett tilted her chin up to look at him. But I need you to know something, Zelda Lawrence. I still can't stop looking at you. After 5 years of marriage, 3 children, all the hard days and beautiful days and everything in between, I still can't stop looking at you. And I never will. Tears pricked Zelda's eyes. I love you so much. I love you more. He kissed her softly. Thank you for taking a chance on a dusty deputy with more hope than sense. Thank you for seeing me when no one else did. They stood there by the creek, wrapped in each other, while the Nebraska sky painted itself in shades of gold and pink above them. Years passed in the way of good lives, full of ordinary joys and small challenges. Tommy grew tall and serious, already showing signs of becoming a capable rancher like his father and grandfather. The twins were wild and fearless, keeping Zelda constantly busy. Barrett's hair developed silver at the temples, and Zelda found laugh lines forming around her eyes. Thomas and Margaret grew older, eventually turning the main operation of the ranch over to Barrett and Zelda. They built a smaller house near the main one, content to spend their days gardening and doting on grandchildren. Jake and Emily had 2 more children, expanding the family further. On their 10th anniversary, Barrett surprised Zelda with something he'd been working on in secret. He took her to the small room off the main living area, the one that had been his grandmother's sewing room, and opened the door with a flourish. Inside, he'd built floor-to-ceiling bookshelves on every wall. They were already partially filled with books, some new, some the treasured volumes he'd given her that first month in Scottsbluff. "A library," Zelda breathed. "Barrett, you built me a library. You said you wanted a room for reading with morning light, so I made you one." He looked uncertain. "Do you like it?" Instead of answering, Zelda pulled him down and kissed him thoroughly. "Like it? I love it. I love you. This is the most wonderful gift. You deserve wonderful things." Barrett wrapped his arms around her waist. "You've given me 10 years of happiness, Zelda. 10 years of love and partnership and family. A library seems like the least I can do." They stood in the library together, surrounded by books and possibilities, and Zelda thought about the girl she'd been. That frightened, scarred, convinced she was unlovable girl who'd scrubbed pots in a saloon kitchen. She wouldn't recognize the woman Zelda had become, wouldn't believe that so much joy was possible. "What are you thinking?" Barrett asked. "That life is strange. That a kitchen girl from Scottsbluff ended up with everything she never knew she wanted. And a deputy marshal tracking an outlaw found the love of his life when he wasn't even looking." Barrett kissed her temple. "Funny how things work out." More children came, 3 more over the years, until the house rang with noise and laughter. Zelda never did learn to see herself the way Barrett saw her, not entirely. But she learned to accept his love, to believe that she was worthy of it. The scar on her face faded with time, becoming just another part of her story rather than the defining feature. She watched her children grow, helped deliver Emily's grandchildren, tended her garden, and filled her library with books. She and Barrett built a life of quiet contentment, their love deepening with each passing year. Sometimes, when the house was quiet and the children were asleep, Barrett would find her in her library, reading by lamplight. He'd sit beside her and pull her close, and she'd rest her head on his shoulder, and they'd stay that way for hours, comfortable in the silence of long companionship. On their 25th anniversary, their children threw them a party. The house was filled with family and friends, with food and music and celebration. Tommy was 23 now, engaged to a sweet girl from town. The twins were 20, beautiful and bold, already breaking hearts across the county. The younger children ran wild with their cousins, filling the air with shrieks of laughter. 25 years, Margaret said, pulling Zelda aside. "I knew from the first moment I met you that you were perfect for my boy. Look at the life you've built together." "I never thought I'd have this," Zelda admitted. "A family, a home, people who love me. It seemed impossible. Nothing's impossible when you have the right person beside you." Margaret squeezed her hand. "You made my son happy, dear. That's all a mother can ask." That night, after the guests had gone and the house was finally quiet, Barrett and Zelda walked out to the porch, looking up at the star-filled sky. 25 years, Barrett mused. Half a lifetime. Best years of my life. Zelda leaned against him. Every single one, even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones. Those were when we learned we could weather anything together. Barrett was quiet for a moment. "Do you remember that first night in Scottsbluff when I told you I couldn't stop looking at you? Of course. I thought you were crazy." "I wasn't crazy, I was certain." He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Zelda Lawrence, I've loved you for 25 years, and I'll love you for 25 more and then another 25 after that. You're the best thing that ever happened to me. You made me believe in something better than chasing outlaws and sleeping rough. You gave me a home, a purpose, a family. You gave me everything. You gave me myself," Zelda said softly. "You taught me I was worth seeing, worth loving. Without you, I'd still be invisible in that saloon kitchen, believing I wasn't pretty enough for anyone to look at twice." "Their loss." Barrett cupped her face gently, his thumbs tracing familiar paths across her cheeks. "Because I can't stop looking at you, Zelda. After 25 years, I still can't stop looking at you, and I never will." He kissed her under the Nebraska stars, and Zelda tasted salt from her own happy tears. This was her life. This love, this family, this home. All of it real, all of it hers. The years continued their march, bringing changes and challenges. Barrett's parents passed peacefully in their sleep within months of each other, leaving behind a legacy of love and hard work. The children married and started families of their own, Tommy taking over more of the ranch operations, the twins moving to town but visiting often. The younger children grew and found their own paths, some staying close to the ranch, others venturing further afield. Barrett and Zelda grew older together, their hair graying, their bodies showing the wear of years of hard work. But their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, tempered by shared experience and deepened by time. On their 40th anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, Zelda looked around at the life they'd built and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. All of this, all these people, had come from one dusty deputy walking into a saloon looking for information about an outlaw. "What would have happened if I hadn't helped you find Dutch Hendricks?" she asked Barrett later that night. "I'd have found him eventually. But I'd have missed out on you, and that would have been the greatest loss of my life." Barrett pulled her close. "Thank God you were brave enough to speak up, brave enough to take a chance on me. I think you took the chance on me. We took a chance on each other, and look what we got." He gestured around at the house, full of sleeping children and grandchildren. "A lifetime of love, a family that keeps growing, more happiness than two people deserve." "I think we deserve it," Zelda said firmly. "After everything we've been through, all the hard days and scary moments, I think we've earned our happiness." "Maybe you're right." Barrett kissed the top of her head. "Happy anniversary, my love. Here's to 40 more years. You'll be over 100. Then I'll be the oldest man in Nebraska, still unable to stop looking at my beautiful wife." They sat together on their porch, watching the stars come out over the ranch they'd built together, and Zelda knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The final years were gentle ones. Barrett and Zelda eventually turned the ranch over to Tommy and his capable wife, moving to the smaller house Barrett's parents had built. Their days were spent in quiet contentment, tending a small garden, reading in Zelda's library, watching their family grow and flourish. Barrett's health began to fail in his 79th year, his strong body finally wearing out after decades of hard use. Zelda nursed him tenderly, reading to him from their favorite books, reminding him of their best memories. "No regrets," he told her one afternoon, his voice weak but certain. "Not a single one. You gave me the best life a man could ask for." "You gave me mine," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You taught me I was worth loving, always were. I just helped you see it." He squeezed her hand with what strength he had left. "Promise me you'll remember. Promise me you'll always know how beautiful you are." I promise. And promise me you won't stop living. Keep reading your books, tending your garden, loving our family. Don't let my leaving stop you from living. I promise, she said again, though she couldn't imagine life without him. Barrett Lawrence passed peacefully in his sleep 3 days later, with Zelda holding his hand, and their children gathered around his bed. He was 79 years old, and he'd lived every one of those years with purpose and love. The grief nearly broke Zelda. For weeks she couldn't sleep in the bed they'd shared, couldn't bear the emptiness beside her. But slowly, with her children's support and the demands of the growing family, she began to heal. Not to forget, never to forget, but to find a way to keep living as she'd promised. She spent her remaining years surrounded by love. Her library became a gathering place for grandchildren wanting stories. Her garden produced vegetables for the whole extended family. She taught her granddaughters to preserve food and her grandsons to see the beauty in growing things. And sometimes, in quiet moments, she'd catch her reflection in a mirror or window and remember a scared girl in a saloon kitchen who thought she'd never be worth looking at. She'd touch the faded scar on her cheek and smile, thinking of the dusty deputy who'd seen past it to the woman beneath. I can't stop looking at you, he'd said, and he'd spent 53 years of marriage proving it. Zelda Lawrence passed peacefully in her sleep at the age of 87, surrounded by photographs of her large, loving family. She died knowing she had been deeply loved, that her life had mattered, that the scared girl from the saloon kitchen had grown into a woman of strength and purpose. At her funeral, Tommy spoke about his parents' love story, about a deputy and a kitchen girl who'd taken a chance on each other, about how his father had never stopped looking at his mother with love in his eyes, even after 53 years of marriage, about how his mother had bloomed under that love, becoming the strong, confident woman who'd raised them all. They taught us that love isn't about perfection, Tommy said, his voice thick with emotion. It's about seeing someone truly, completely, and choosing them anyway. It's about building a life together one day at a time. It's about never giving up, even when things are hard. He looked out at the gathered family, at the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who all carried Barrett and Zelda's legacy forward. They started with nothing but hope and courage, and they built all this. They built us, and that's a pretty remarkable love story. In the cemetery outside Scottsbluff, 2 headstones stood side by side. Barrett Lawrence, devoted husband and father, said one. Beloved wife and mother, said the other. But in the hearts of their family, they were remembered for more than those simple descriptions. They were remembered as 2 people who'd found each other against all odds, who'd built a life of love and purpose, who'd proven that beauty isn't what's seen on the surface but what's revealed in the seeing. And somewhere in the vast Nebraska sky, 2 souls found each other again, and Barrett Lawrence was still unable to stop looking at the woman he'd loved across a lifetime.